So I think I have the topic here is about dance and choreography. And one thing, though we have a lot of academic definitions to choreographies being, related to the word choreo or making dance sequences or designing or creating group movements or even notating dance. All these come under the purview of choreography at different points of time. For me, at this point of time and space, for me, it's essentially uh, the dancer's preference to use physicality to express something or not even express something. So basically, it's entirely the dancer's discretion to portray something, or even through her silence or through the dance design if she does not want to make a statement or vocalize something. So choreography has changed. If you look from in terms of Indian classical dancing, the definitions of choreography has really changed. Here in Indian classical dancing, the term would be relevant, I think, post 1900s or in the mid of 1800s. But otherwise, for us, if you talk about Indian classical dance, forget the group secular dances or the folk dances. Academically, if you look at Indian classical dances, we were all basically solo. If you look at solo dancing, if you look at theatrical dances, it had followed the Bhakti cult. So now, if you look at solo dances, the purpose of our classical dance was more esoteric uh, than entertainment. So, if you're talking about the temple construction, and if you're talking about dancers being dedicated into temples, for them it was about their communication with uh, with who or what was in the sanctum sanctorum. And the dancers, if you look at the socio-political cultural context, then the dancers were actually forced to reckon the idol as something that had life, even more than life itself. They were married to the deities, and therefore they were supposed to dance as a part of the temple upacharas, or the according to the Agama Shastras, where you had Geetam Samarpayami, you had Nrittam Samarpayami, and the dancers had to be a part of that whole process. So when I interviewed the last surviving Devadasi of India, Shashimani Devi, now she's no more. So she was the last Devadasi of Jagannath Puri temple. I saw her in the corridors of Puri at a Samaritan's house where uh, she had been married to the Lord when she was 8 years old. And uh, then when they found her unfit, she was actually taken out of the temple precincts, and some good citizen, finding pity on her, gave her a small space in her small house in a small corridor, and all she had was this bandam of, of Jagannath's. All her belongings. She was old, she was bald, but she had her veil, and over her really thin, slim arms, she had a lot of bangles dangling. So, and that sinduram. Now, when I asked her, what did you choreograph and what did you dance for the Lord, she said she was to dance only in front of the Lord and there was nobody else watching her. So, ideally, she would create pieces of conversation with the Lord. And sometimes she would say that sometimes she wouldn't dance, sometimes she felt that the Lord was angry, sometimes she felt. So, it had a lot of psychological gleanings. Whatever she performed, I felt that it had a lot of psychology and her perspective of dance itself was very different from what we see today. Starting from that, so if we actually, maybe if we have her as a prototype of most of the Devadasis, what happened later on when they came out of temples to the courts were, so obviously in the temples as dance being esoteric and a part of upacharas, and of having different kinds of dances at different points of worship or different times of worship for different karmas of worship. When it came out from temples into courts, the choreography was entirely uh, based on what the kings found delight in and what his audience or his invitees found delight in. So therefore, the repertoire slowly changes. You find the introduction of, initially the speech was direct, which you usually find that in padams, right? The speech is bhakti and it is often active voice. When it comes to court, it's active voice again. Only thing, slowly the heroes have changed from the lords to the more living kings, and therefore you have pieces like Javali and all introduced, and they were really light-hearted songs too. So that's how you find a change in design in the choreographic patterns of something as simple as solo dances, right? And even if they also had two, three dancers dancing together, they had similar patterns. Most of the time, you would find not much of dance designing, but you would find dance design within the movement, but repeatedly done by the simultaneously done by two or three dancers. So that's all you can find then. If you look at if you look at the resurrection stage, you find that post-colonialism, you have revivalists and pioneers, and the purpose of dance now became more as a post-colonial statement as to the fact that it had preserved our culture in a certain way. It had preserved our thought processes. It had crystallized history. It had crystallized human behavior. It had crystallized a thought that was so specific to our country and sometimes even East Asia or even Eurasia. So we shared those really common links with the other regions, and therefore the purpose was more political, and then you find a lot of resurrection happening in dance. You find people like Rukmini Devi Arundel, who was trained in ballet, bringing in proscenium kind of stagecraft to performances of Bharatanatyam. That is when you actually start seeing the impact of group choreography in its exact sense. Because she was trained in ballet by Anna Pavlova in Russian ballet, you can see that precision in all her movement. You can find stagecraft, you can find costumes, you can find dance designs, all that. Similarly, you have the then contemporary dancers like Chandralekha and Uday Shankar and Natraj Ramji, Ram Gopal, and people like that who were more into creating, who were more into crystallizing what is Oriental in performances, in their dances. So the thought about being exotic ruled the roost. So India suddenly became an exotic place, just like Southeast Asia. So you found a lot of dancers moving from here outside, then dancers coming from outside like Simki and Ragini Devi and Indrani Rehma are settling here, studying our art forms, taking tours, bringing troops. Then you have Tagore coming in, taking people like Kalyani Amma, who is a Mohiniyattam dancer here, into the Shantiniketan, creating movement. So basically, that age you found dance typically as a medium, also not really as a regional medium. A lot of regional mediums of dance were taken uh, to bring in choreography in terms of content, like new could be new content, or it could be just some postmodern content. You have Chandralekha tiptoeing on modern concepts of the feminine, of sexuality, of transgenderism, and all that basically suddenly from what was seen as a bhakti oriented. So even if you look at Indian classical dance, what makes it actually classical? If you ask me, what defines our dance forms as classical is purely academic, because what is the definition of being classical? Ideally, it has to appeal to the class, and today that definition does not hold. The mass is the class is the mass. Has to be. You can't bring out a definition like that today. Then they say it has rigid practices. You find a lot of folk art forms having rigid practices, so you can't actually say only Indian classical dance is folk practices. Then they say it follows the ancient text of the Natya Shastra. It needn't. Again, I would say that statement itself has a lot of uh, various other connotations about it. Even if you don't follow Natya Shastra, you still can. Our Keralite art forms, I don't think everything follows Natya Shastra. We don't need to bring an attempt to root it in Natya Shastra purposefully, right? Then there is then the other definition is it has to have a lineage of followers. And I think even you have so many folk forms that have lineage of followers. You find certain ritual art forms like Theyyam. You have certain forms like even social, satirical art forms like the Orotangali. All that which still has, rigid systems of training. So we can't exactly segregate classical, but what I would think is classical dance came out of the Bhakti cult, with Vaishnavism ruling the roost, and with a lot of Krishna themes coming into the floor. Basically, it was Krishna dance. If you ask me, if you look at all the Indian classical dances, the common motive is Krishna. But now, like I said, when you find people like Chandralekha and the rest of the dancers, the thinking had gone beyond Krishna. It was more realistic. And how do you portray realistic, making realistic impressions into art? How does it appeal? How do you address themes that really excite you or themes that really move you? How do you actually see your body as a medium of self-expression? So then you've learned your medium, and you don't want to stick to something that has been, conventionally taught. You don't want to stick to that. Then why don't you use your medium to express something else? So you don't really need to. Therefore, you even had a lot of, uh, you know, foreigners coming and learning our art for the sake of not propagating Indian culture as such, but for the sake of actually using the medium to portray something that they really liked. Or it could be nowadays you find a lot of foreigners doing that. I have a lot of foreign students who learn dance to make pieces from their own country. I have a Mexican student called Avril who is now collaborating with me on using a Mohiniyattam repertoire to bring about environmental issues and social issues of Mexico. So, gone are the days when, I would still say you can't really call this classical. There is maybe for an academic purpose, yes. So, talking about choreography. Choreography is based on a lot of things. If you ask me, one is very simple. What is being taught to you through the Guru Shishya Parampara? They are very rigid, and you can stick to that and create pieces. You can extend that and extend your repertoire, create more new pieces. You can still be purist in your content or rigid in your content, but create new movement. You need not be rigid in your content, but you stick to original movement. You need not be rigid in both. You can create completely out of the box work. All this is happening in choreography these days. See, if you look at, I was talking about Bharatanatyam. Now, if you come to Mohiniyattam, it's a different story altogether. You cannot study Mohiniyattam as an art form like the way you vision. Even in research, you cannot use Mohiniyattam the way you would research some other dance form, because the purpose of Mohiniyattam itself is very, very different. It was kind of secular. If you look at our history, say in the 1700s and the 1800s, the purpose was not very regal, in the sense that towards the end of the 18th century, I mean, towards the end of the 19th century, you would find Mohiniyattam being performed uh, in order to uh, reiterate something called or reiterate the Sambandha Vyavastha, which is a very particular kind of a polygamous situation that existed in the matriarchal society of a particular class in Kerala. The women were empowered, but they had the ability to have multiple partners. And Mohiniyattam slowly was used as a device by women during that particular time. I know we don't know the past history, but I'm talking about 1800s. Uh, and and then it was banned because obviously the purpose didn't seem very great. We had English educated people, uh, um, and then the importance of monogamy. The monogamy was introduced in the Hindu Nair Act, and therefore the flavor of the art form slowly. I mean, it was it. I would say it kind of ceased to exist as it was then, but it was very beautiful. And if you look at the lyrical imagery that Maharaja Swati Tirunal gave it to it, you can clearly see that he was so influenced by the lyrical quality of the dance. And Kerala actually has a lot of importance to poetry. If Tamil Nadu is for music, Kerala has a lot of importance to poetry. There were a lot of poets. And the lyrical imagery of Mohiniyattam really influenced him to write a lot of lyrics based on love and longing and separation. And he was also influenced by the Maratha kings who resurrected Sadir Atam. And he thought he would do that for Mohiniyattam. The result was Mohiniyattam became very systematic because he brought in the Nalvars from the Tanjore court, who had by then systematized Sadir. Mohiniyattam was also tried to be systematized on a similar note. But again, 1800s, we had all this upheaval and Mohiniyattam was banned post Swati Tirunal. Now comes the resurrection period. I was just talking about Rukmini Devi Arundel, but here Mahakavi Vallatol in Kerala resurrected Mohiniyattam. He gave it its most pristine quality. He retained the beauty. He eliminated all the unnecessary things. Now you must know, unnecessary is what he thought. If you ask me, there were a lot of stuff that was really beautiful, needn't have been eliminated. It spoke of women empowerment by itself. Anyway, that's a different story. But of course, um, so he kind of resurrected the art form and it became so beautiful. And there is a quality about the art form which is very sensuous, in the sense, I'm not talking about the explicit kind of sensuous. It's more like, because of the pace of the art form, it's more like a conversation with yourself. It's slow paced, and the attitude you take while doing a Mohiniyattam performance is very different than the attitude you would take while doing a Bharatanatyam performance. It is slow paced. Every point in space has to be enjoyed. And usually when you do fast movements, you can camouflage your imperfections. But when you come to very slow movements, each movement in space can be seen by the audience, and therefore you have to be extremely careful about the movement that you do. It has to be done with a lot of joy. What happens in the process is that when you are stretching time and when you are experiencing each movement in every point in space, you live in the present. And that kind of influences your life too. You become more aware of yourself at that moment. And that's why I say it's very sensuous, in the sense that you get to know about yourself. There's this restrained quality about the art form that makes you patient. And I have seen that, how it has influenced me as a person in my own life too. Now, coming to choreography, these days choreography is based on a lot of things, right? Uh, Once Valathol Mahakavi resurrected it, slowly they choreographed a lot of group pieces because they had to teach a lot of students. Then Mohiniyattam became a state of self-expression. Then you have people like Dr. Kanakrale, Bharti Shivaji, who came and gave it another flavor totally. They brought in women-oriented pieces. You have Srikavalam Narayana Panikar, who you all would be knowing because you're all theatre students. He brought in primitive theatre in Indian theatre, and therefore he had influenced Mohiniyattam too, in the sense that he brought in something, the concept of making it organic or indigenous to the Keralite soil, because Mohiniyattam had a lot of other influences from the Carnatic music Paddhati. And what Kavalam Narayana Panikar sir did was he tried to make it more indigenous. He tried to have that another flavor, what is very organic. He brought in the aspect of primitive rhythms, which is very organic to our state. He brought in the aspect of primitive of acting that is very particular to Kerala. He brought in the aspect of minimalism. He brought in something called something like a solo theatre. And I was also his. I have had the blessing of having associated with him for many of my work. He created Chilapati Karam for me. And I think when I was in my late 20s, my work on Chilapati Karam actually gave me a lot of laurels, and I attribute that to him. And I worked with him with a lot of rhythms of Teyam and a lot of movement dynamic. Now, the situation now is pretty much the same. You have dancers using Mohiniyattam as a state of self-expression, but still very, there are debates about this movement being done only like this, that movement being done only like that, legs not raised, no flow movements, no different costume, no color blouse, always Sringaram. It has to be Lasya. It has to only have love. Now that is the point when I brought about my work called Sarpatattvam. And I'll just show you um, how Sarpatattvam was actually a piece totally out of the box. Now let me see if I can. It was based on Pambati Siddhar's, who was a Dalit. His lyrics, and it's beautiful. It talks about he was a mystic saint, and what attracted me to the concept was the serpent itself as a motif of feminine energy everywhere, even in our Indian civilization, in Egyptian civilization, in Mediterranean, in all our ancient civilizations, you find that common motif, even in China. So even if you look at the Bible, so I loved the idea of transmutation. I loved the idea of the alchemist. The Siddhas were alchemists. They could convert base metals into gold. Like Cleopatra was an alchemist too. I would say she was a Siddha. If you look at Egypt, kings and queens were anointed only once they had proven their spiritual powers. So serpent definitely had a very, I think it's a part of our DNA. And for several reasons, Kerala has a very profound serpent worship cult. I was very intrigued by that, and therefore I brought about. It's just a 10-minute piece, totally a 28-minute documentary, which was voted into the Oscars. It was simple. It was never meant to go anywhere else. It was just a part of my archiving piece because I don't have none of my work is really seen online. And, Sarpatattvam was just a glimpse of one of my work. And I'd like to just show you how I just show small excerpts of how I have changed movement. I did the music myself. Also, I brought in flow movements. I brought in a little bit of nuanced acting. I brought in a different fine art also into the whole. So for me, it had a lot of philosophy. It had spirituality. It had fine art. It had everything, except that Except that everything was there in my mind. What you say is just 20% of what I had in my mind, because I don't think you need to show everything. The mental narrative, I think, even in drama, usually it's like that. The mental narrative need not will be very different from the executional narrative. You need not show everything that you know. You just need to give the right dose, knowing completely what your audience would be like. So hopefully, let me see if this works. I'm just showing a. Can you see? Are you able to see?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
ஆடு பாம்பே விளையாடு பாம்பே 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 ஆடு பாம்பே விளையாடு பாம்பே
So there you see a flow movement. Now I'll show you a very nuanced place where the serpent says, where the line, the Siddhar says that it it sees, it cannot see with its eyes, but it sees with its ears. So it gets vibrations. So that's very yoga like, because actually the serpent senses objects through a very different mechanism of sensing, not like us human beings. And that's the same kind of contemplative sensing that we are supposed to have in meditation or in yoga. And there is a small metaphor that I have drawn there. I will show you that bit. It says kannai seviyaga kondal aadu paambe. He uses the eyes become the ears, or vice versa. And dance, O serpent.
வல்லமை கொண்டார் மாயனுக்கு படுங்கைக்க வள்ள பாகுமானார் கண்ட பாடை நடுங்கிட காட்சியும் பேரை கண்ட பாடை நடுங்கிட காட்சியும் பேற்றை கண்ணை செவியாக கொண்ட ஆடு பாம்பே கண்ணை செவியாக கொண்ட ஆடு பாம்பே கண்ணை செவியாக கொண்டாய் 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 ஆடு பாம்பே விளையாடு பாம்பே விளையாடு பாம்பே ಶಂಕರನ ಕಾರಣ ತಾನುವಾಗಿನೇ ಚಂದಿರನೆ ಸೂರ್ಯನೇ ತವಿ ಇಂದನೇ ಶಂಕರನ ಕಾರಣ ತಾನುವಾಗಿನೇ ಮಂದಿರಕ್ಕೆ ಕಡಂಗಿ ಮಂಡಲವಿಟ್ಟೆ ಮಂದಿರಕ್ಕೆ ಕಡಂಗಿ ಹೇ ಮಂದಿರಕ್ಕೆ ಕಡಂಗಿ ಹೇ ಮಂದಿರಕ್ಕೆ ಕಡಂಗಿ ಮಂಡಲವಿಟ್ಟೆ ಮಂದಿರಕ್ಕೆ ಕಡಂಗಿಯೇ 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 ಮಂಡಲವಿಟ್ಟೆ விளையாடு பாம்பே விளையாடு பாம்பே ஆடு பாம்பே ஆடு பாம்பே ஆடு பாம்பே
So, thank you. So, that was Sarvatattvam. And it's what you call, I'm sure you've heard of trance theatre. It has a bit of, it's trance dancing. That is what I would like to say. And how there we've merged even the pictorial art where the five colors actually represent our five senses, and how how one through the process of getting moksha actually, how it is all erased, your senses. And it's so important to erase that. And that is why one has to go from form to formlessness. But form is very important to formlessness, right? And that is exactly the serpent. It has a very dichotomic existence. One is that it has, uh, it roots us to our senses, which is why you often find that associated with sexuality also. It roots us to a sentence, but the very motive liberates us. So it is through that it is through our sense that you actually need to, liberate yourself too. Similarly, it is poisonous, but the very poison of a snake can cure a lot of diseases too. So it's this dichotomic existence of the serpent that I try to bring out here in Sarpatattvam. Talking about a very different. Now we were talking about senses. Now let me bring. You're all into theatre. Are you all into theatre?
Theater, dance, history, commerce.
Right, all right. So, my recent work, which is Ahalya, every time I do a work, I do a choreography. I make a very multi-pronged approach to it. I ensure that there is some kind of that the facts, I have my facts right. I ensure that I have my primary sources intact, that I don't really rely only on my secondary source, because sometimes, most of the time, when people do their work, they probably think the secondary source is the primary source. And what happens is they see a similar work which uses the same lines, they probably think it's being copied. So that is why it is very important for you to know your primary source. Uh, then I ensure that it is philosophically right. It has the right symbolic interpretation. Um, it is, if possible, it is realistic, and if possible, I make it as accurate. If I'm using Sanskrit, I stick to the meaning, the real meaning of Sanskrit, of course, from which I can then bring out my suggested meaning. Because suggested meaning, everything is there in the suggested meaning through dance. And then, most importantly, it has to be as aesthetic as possible. If you don't make it aesthetic, and if you have all the rest four, your dance has gone to the dogs. Even if you don't have the first four, and if it is aesthetic, it will still stay, because finally, your work has to be aesthetic. So, I let me see if I can show you a glimpse of my recent Ahalya, which is not premiered. It was just world premiered, but it is not anywhere online, and it is not supposed to be online. They have the rights. It is commissioned by the Canadian Arts. It's commissioned by Sampradaya Dance Company, and who's a organization based in Canada, and they had commissioned my work, saying they wanted something related to COVID inspired. And for me, Ahalya's isolation really inspired me, and I took up Valmiki's Ahalya, and I knew she was not a stone, because most of the Ramayanas talk of her as a stone, and it was very, very, I'm so used to getting into symbols that for me, at one glance, I knew she could not be a stone. She could have been stone-like. And the fact that we've all become stone-like through the pieces, through certain periods of isolation right now. We've all turned our senses inwards, right? We can't go to good restaurants, we can't go to good places, we are not able to see our friends. So all our senses are now limited. And therefore, I knew, made me think about Indra as being the lord of the senses. Definitely the fact that she fell for her senses. It's quite obvious she would have fallen for Indra too, which is why I always see my work realistically. And luckily, in Valmiki Ramayana, he also says that. So, and it's a very realistic description of Ahalya, where she recognizes Indra. Obviously, a person dressed up as, as the spouse, it's not very difficult for a woman like Ahalya, that too. Even for an ordinary woman, it's not very difficult to recognize. So Ahalya is not going to be difficult at all. Because she was a Muni Patni, she had very great powers. So I'll show you that bit in which Indra and Ahalya meet. And I've done the music myself. I've used Valmiki's lyrics, but the lyric, Indra, Atindra, Ratindra, the signature lyric is my own. The music is done by myself, in the sense that including all the chollus and all that. So I'll show you being into theatre and dance, how the scene, I can't show you the whole thing, but I'll just show you the snippet where Indra meets her. He comes on his elephant, Airavatam. See, all this is not mentioned in Valmiki, that he comes on his Airavatam. These are all the dancers' poetic descriptions, where the dancer then adds on. Once she's got the facts intact, then she tries to build on that. So then I thought it was best to portray him. It's only common sense to think of him on his elephant. And the elephant says, look at Ahalya. And then Indra disguises himself as Gautama. If you know the hand gesture language of Kerala, it would be very interesting for you to know what they say. But unfortunately, I don't know how many of you can understand the nuances. But the hand gestures, first I shouldn't be saying this, but then I will still say. He says, my desire arises, and I am going to, change my garb to Gautama Maharshi's and I'm going to see her. And then he leaves. He sends the elephant away and he goes to her. She sees him. And then, of course, she recognizes him. And he says, "How did you?" And she says, um, "My husband, you look just like Gautama Maharshi, but you don't look at me like Gautama Maharshi does." So, um, and then he says that, you look like a withered flower. Aren't you happy? She says, "No, no, I'm happy." And then the mean him says, for me, Rutukalam pratikshante nardhina susamahite sangamam tvaham ichchami tvaya sahasumadhyame, which means, to me, it doesn't matter if it's safe, it's the safe time of you to be in union or to populate. For me, it doesn't matter if you want children or not. I am an enjoyer of beauty, and I want to enjoy your beauty. So from that, we know that Gautama Maharshi actually used to say that he wouldn't be intimate with her unless for having children. And Ahalya really falls for that. I mean, Indra really knows where to tap her. And he waits for her and she comes. So that's all there is. But this is, always remember, this is dance. And how do you interweave dance into a mood? The dance music to get into the mood. The first line starts with, Tasyantaram vidhitvatus that means Tasyantaram vidhitvat. Gautama has left, knowing his departure. Sahasraksha, who's Indra, comes and tells Ahalya this. From that line, I have kind of used if you have learned Dwani or the theory of suggestion, this is an exact portrayal of how the theory of suggestion works in Sanskrit poetics and in Rasadhvani. And this is an exact example. Let me see if it plays. Can you see? Can you get the... So that's the point where she comes to him. So I don't actually show her coming, but I show him waiting and then seeing her presence. The next scene switches on to their, to their union, which is again done in a very different way. So this scene, actually, this was, it didn't take me as much time as I did this to choreograph this. It was just immediate because I had the complete thing intact. And so now this was choreographed for an international audience, which means we had Keralites, we had Indians, we had dancers abroad, and dancers who were really good in their respective styles. So what happens is when you choreograph something for an audience, like that, then your dance should have the flavor of your art form, yet it should be something else. It should have, especially when you use another medium called the camera, there should be something else about it too. It can either be a proper videography of an archival work of yours, or camera itself can be a performer. So my future work would be such that the camera itself is a performer. Because for me also, I'm rather new to this particular scene. So choreography is really based on, now this was essentially, I stuck to my basics. You know why? In the sense I stuck typically to Mohiniyattam without really, I didn't want to really get dressed up so much. I wanted to be very simple. But if you ask me, for me, I had to ensure that when I make a piece, I'm also looking at who my audience is. So, which means, have they actually seen my performances before? So if I give a performance that's totally out of the box, they may probably think that I know nothing about traditional Mohiniyattam, and I don't want that to happen. So therefore, what is their knowledge about me? How much have they seen of my work? If they haven't seen anything, it's about time I present to them what really my how traditionally sound I am, how sound I am in my basics. And perhaps the next time I would do something out of the box. I should also take into consideration the fact that I also have a strong Malayali audience watching me. And they wouldn't take, it would be very difficult for them to see me doing something that probably they're very, very loyal to, they're sticklers to, their art forms. They know so much about Mohiniyattam, they know so much about Kathakali, they know so much about Kudiyattam that and they know so much about my work that if I do something a little devious, it may look a little dubious. So I have to be really careful about what I really do, and therefore I think the onus is entirely on the dancer. But we must also take into account that we have international audience now. Our audience not just restricted to Keralites or Indians. We have a whole lot of established performers abroad in theatre, even if they are in theatre, or even if they are in modern theatre or tribal theatre or even dance. All of them are watching you. So, what do you really want to portray to your dance? What is it that I would like to portray? Is it Mohiniyattam or is it my representation of Mohiniyattam? What is it that I would also like to portray as a woman, as a Keralite, as an Indian? And what aspect of my Mohiniyattam would I really like to show? And what aspect do I like to delete? These are things that one really takes into account when you choreograph. Again, music is of now here. This is an exact example where you don't usually what do dancers do? They get the music and they do the dance. Now this is an exact example where dance, music, and lyrics flew together because I was doing it all together. So it was not like I got the music and then I made the dance. No, in the choreography, I knew what instrument I wanted. While mounted the elephant, I broke into that lyric and I broke into that tune. So it was all very, very coherent. But now what happens when you're given a song by somebody else? Then you have to choreograph accordingly. I can't do a Mohiniyattam in a song that does not suit the language of Mohiniyattam. I would do something in a style that suits the song. So I may have to, I would have to give complete justice to the musician or the composer who probably hasn't even seen me as a dancer dancing. He probably has a song composed and he's singing it and the song is perhaps beautiful. Then I must do a movement vocabulary that actually suits that particular song. And that's how a lot of my work, like, Jadayu, Rajiv Anchal's Jadayu, which was, it's a very different work. Not my kind of style, but I did it according to the music that M. Jayachandran did. Then I did the Narasimha Dandagam, which was in Kuchipudi, SPB had sung it. I did it in a way that it actually stuck to that language, to that flavor of his singing and to that instrumentation. Then similarly, various others, like Jim Reeves, I Can't Stop Loving You. It was a very different vocabulary. Nangeli. Now that was given to me by Sri Ramesh Narayan, and I had to do justice to his music. I didn't have, all I did was tell him that maybe I will add a little bit of, to complete the act, I need this. And that I did. I went to the studio, then I gave it a few more rhythmic cholas or a few more mridangams so that I could actually complete the act. And that made a lot of difference. So I can't, just because I am a so-called performer, I don't think it is, I think you have to be versatile. And I believe that, after all, it's just energies. We have two arms and two legs. And whatever we do is through this two arms and two legs. And every style is just a demarcation of energies. One style will be more restraint. One style will be more, the energy will be really explicit. And I think it's just these energy. It's the songs, the language may vary, the rhythmic pace will vary, the instruments can vary, but what is same is your body. Your body will still be there. Your flavor will still be there. And I think that's how one actually works with movement. We can't be rigid if we have to make great work. We can be rigid, but within the rigidity, I think you also have to be very expansive. You have to embrace. And after all, you have, it's like cooking basically. No wonder Bharata Muni always equates dance and drama with cooking. He uses the word rasa also. So this really is like, when I make a choreography and when I have my training in my gallery, in my training space, it's like every household they have their cooking style. Every household they have their cooking preferences of food. Whatever ingredients they put is very specific to that household. Similarly, choreography and dance is similarly. Whatever I do is very specific to my taste of cooking. Yet somebody from outside can also relish it, and that's the exact tattvam that I follow for my career. Yeah, I think I'll probably go in for questions.
Okay, we'll have a brief discussion now. And I'm very happy that to hear from Devika once more. Actually, we were together
Yeah.
at the Christ University a few years back, and I was fortunate to hear from her the entire process of Sarpadattam, how
Yeah.
she composed it. We don't have time to like now to explain all that, but yeah. And as School of Drama is also fortunate that we started School of Drama. Dancers from like Padma Subramaniam to Mallika Sarabai visited
Wow.
School of Drama,
Wow. Yeah.
and now you are not physically present here, but you are part of School of Drama now. So very happy for that. And let's start the discussion. It was wonderful, wonderful session, and it was nice to watch you perform also, though it is online.
Yeah. And I'm glad
Yeah,
this is the first time I'm sharing Ahalya to somebody online. And
fine,
like
and
this,
that's
me sharing it, it came on chalet.com, which is like Netflix. And it had it had a very exorbitant, I think theirs was 1,250 rupees was their ticket price. So
oh,
I'm so glad that I was able to share this in this platform, because I know, we have a lot of people who would be interested in looking at all the comments that I'm seeing right now. I'm so glad that I've got so many great comments. Thank you all for your comments.
so we'll start the discussion now. I have something to ask. That is, can you just share with us your experience with Kavala Narayan Panikar and his style of or his contribution to resurrect Mohiniyattam? Because we heard very little about it.
Okay. So, Kavalam Narayana Panikar sir, definitely, he was a trailblazer of his time, in the sense that um, he was a person who was a lyricist, he was a dramatist, he was a philosopher, he knew visuals, the language of visuals. He knew very organic music, because he had lived in a place where there was a lot of folk singing and a lot of those kind of he knew the Kerala Tala Paddhati completely. And what he did was he adapted all this into his theatre performance. And being a visionary, the Mohiniyattam that he saw, he was not really very happy, because he felt that it looked, it had the same, musically it resembled Bharatanatyam. That's when he started writing lyrics for Mohiniyattam, and therefore tuning it in a way that he wanted this aspect of the Kerala to be inherent in the art form, so that it stands apart from from the rest of the styles. And with there were a lot of people like Dr. Kanakale and Bharti Shivaji initially who joined him, and who participated in his repertoire and promoted it. And it really stood out, for all the Sopana Sangeetam that he used. But what happened was there then became two schools, where people still stuck to Karnataka Paddhati, and then people said this was not structurized itself. For me personally, I remember I went to him directly and I asked him, I want to do Chilapatikaram. And there was a Mohiniyattam festival happening that he had coordinated. And he said, why? And I was meeting him for the first time. And then he said, I have been so, I think I wanted to do it from a very young age, because Amar Chitra Katha and Mohit, the Chilapatikaram visuals had really stuck on. I was 9 years old when I really wanted to do Chilapatikaram. I was just 9 years old, and it stayed with me. And then he said, okay, I will write the lyrics. You want the lyrics in Malayalam or Tamil? I said, I would like Tamil, but let's make it more, more accessible to the public. So he wrote it. He put some Tamil words, making it seem very very, have the Tamil feel. But then it was essentially in Malayalam. He composed it in Padayani, in the Talam Padayani in Panjari, which is used in Padayani. And then I staged that. I remember the first draft of choreography was booked by Kalamandalam Sudhavi, which was 8 minutes. Then I performed it in Delhi, and I got a criticism saying that Madhavi and Kannagi, the same divinity was there in Madhavi's eyes. She could not delineate the characters. And then that was the first time I started thinking about acting. and and what was 8 minutes suddenly became 25 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes. And then all this delineation, this was way back when I was about 28 years old. So from then on, my association with him has been in the sense that I worked with him. Actually, I have not taken many of his songs like many other dancers. I probably, because I also stick to the pure Karnataka Paddhati. So, but I also I'm very choosy about what I take from him. But we worked in the sense that we worked on a few compositions from Kalitoge to.
Ma'am, we can't hear you. You're
Please
on mute.
unmute.
Sorry. Okay. So we worked together on some pieces from Kalitogai, from Sangam literature. And then we worked on, because I knew the notation system, we worked on talas from Theyyam. I remember sitting with him for many days, making the talas for Theyyam, systematizing it. Then also he used my body language to create a movement vocabulary for the charis that he was making in Sobana theatre from the Natya Shastra. Because I was trained in many forms, he probably thought that I had a much more versatile way of creating movement according to the scriptures, and not shouldn't, he was very specific, it shouldn't look like one particular art form. So it was very theatrical, and I think he had documented it. I remember him to be a person who was so, he used to give. If he liked somebody, he would give so much of his information. To me, particularly, I'm sure I remember him being extremely extravagant with information. And he would also, then I was quite new to Trivandrum, he would drop me, and he liked me because I remember him telling me that I probably gave him my work. It was not previously written by him, but I made him write. Usually he would write and then give others. Mine was actually the other way around. I would give him the concept and he would write. The last work that he's written for me, which is yet to see the to see daylight, was The Night That Siddhartha Left, which is Buddha. And I remember calling him one day and I said, I'm thinking about this. Please, can you write? And he said, why do you want to think of this right now? So I said, no, I think it's something that happens in everybody's mind. One way or the other, they want to run away from life, run away from reality. And Siddhartha was one such person too. But the fact that he ran away and sought his, initiation, he became Buddha. Not all of us become Buddha. so he said, okay, wait. And then after 5 minutes, he called me, and then he wrote, through the phone. And then he wrote those lines. See, the good thing about him was because he was also a philosopher and a visual, he could get the visuals immediately. And then I made a condition that I don't want it in Kerala Talam or Sobana style. I want it in Karnataka Paddhati. Ordinarily, he would have killed me because he's against the Karnataka style. But I think it was his affection for me that he said, of course, okay, we will do. He said, then he said, I will take you to be Shashi Kumar sir, the violinist. And Shashi Kumar sir has composed it in, yet it is in a talam called Navagam, which makes it very difficult for the musician to sing. So I would be slowly bringing out that piece too, because I think it would be a great tribute to him. Personally, I know he has told me once that although I don't like dancers following the Karnataka style, when you do a dance based on the Karnataka system, it still has a lot of Keralite element to it. So I was glad, and that's my association with Kavalam Narayana Panikar, who brought in a lot of. He also brought in a lot of movement theatre in his work, in his dramatic work. If you see, not only the indigenous aspects of Kerala, I know that he was also influenced by Southeast Asian movement dynamic, and whatever was very, very ingrained to the soil of a particular place, he would adapt that. And my association with him has actually made me realize the importance that it is not about a big content. It is about whatever the content is. It's not about making tall claims. It's even if it's something very small, your execution is what is most important. It's not the what of what you do, but it is the how of what you do that is responsible for producing rasa. And he says the audience mind is like the playground. The dancer dances in the playground of the mind of the audience. As the dance stops, it begins in the mind of the audience. So, yeah. I can't hear you, Vinod, sir. I can't hear you.
We have 20 minutes more, so people please join. They can ask the comments or questions or share their experience with Devika ma'am. And please, Twinkle, why don't you ask something? Twinkle is a dancer and a scholar, research scholar.
Vinod, I can find some questions in chat box.
Yeah, sure.
Ma'am, can you read yourself or shall I?
Yeah, please read it. I read a question which is the way Mohiniyattam was sculpted system. Why am I? Just a minute. I'm just scared my charge will go off.
And again, I saw Vinod Manira raise his hand. A few more. They can also. Yeah.
Okay. The way Mohiniyattam was sculpted, systematized, and developed in the 19th century, being as it is an art form, placed so much of emphasis on the performance of femininity as soft, secondary, and submissive. Would you say that it was part of an unconscious to contain and control the dominance of women in our culture, which is matrilineal, the ruling, and the many castes? Actually, there are two ways to go about it. Which is basically we were still in a patriarchal society which had matrilineal leanings, especially which was very particular to the Nair community. The fact that I wouldn't say that Mahakavi Vallatol, when Mahakavi Vallatol resurrected it, he still brought about the aspect of Sringaram and Lasyan. Now, God alone knows what was in his mind when he when he did that, right? It could have been. See, finally, it's a male again. Male was still he and even A.K. Raja, they were all responsible for resurrecting a part of it. So, what was in his psyche? I'm not very sure, but I have read anecdotes of a couple of dancers, which I wouldn't like to mention here. I have heard that. Definitely, they had a flair to retain the feminine quality, not as a quality of intrinsic value, but as a quality of external beauty, right? So that is why they still stuck to the aspect of Sringaram and Lasyam. And poor teachers in Kerala Kalamandalam, I would say they had no idea that they were being a part of this construct when they would say, Varsham kuda Lasyan Jayikutti, Varsham kuda Sringaram Verate. When they say that, do some more Lasya, do some more Sringara, poor things, they had no idea that they were actually echoing the voice of a couple of, people who had. But again, the fact that he resurrected the art form itself is again a kind of liberation that he gave the art form, which had almost which was marginalized completely. and which was banned completely. There were Mohiniyattam dancers who were stoned in 1930s in Thrissur. And it wasn't that he completely negated it, he still brought it, but this flavor of the feudalistic and the and the other flavor was still there. Yeah. It's a very sensitive question. Yeah.
Sunil, who raised the hand?
Yeah, Vinod Manira. Vinod, can you unmute and please ask?
I wish I could see the people who.
Yeah, and again there is Praveen Raj. Ma'am, will you read from the chat box or Praveen? One question.
See, what the choreographer or performer should emphasize is entirely their discretion. If they want to politicize art, or like you say, the politics of art. What is the politics of art? It's again a very personal. It's a very personal statement. What is spiritual about it is also very serious. For me, what seems spiritual may not be another artist's spirituality. For another artist, spirituality would be about bringing in very socially relevant themes. Because if you ask me, if I probably follow Tattvamasi, I could even follow the Ubuntu of the Ubuntu of Africans, where for them Ubuntu is a very strong statement which says I am because you are, and that comes out of the mentality that came after the apartheid, where I exist because of you, and this is the community. We are a community, and we are one. So for me personally, I could probably or probably move to that maybe over a course of time. So what a person thinks is spiritual, or what would one like to delineate to the art, is actually what happens during every point of time. So if you ask me now, I'm still in a transitioning phase. Every phase is a work in progress. I probably love to do something on. For me, if you ask me, right now, I would love to even restate what beauty is by bringing in, the beauty of cancer patients into the fore. Uh, people who've had surgeries, who've had breast surgeries. So I would like to redefine the aspect of beauty itself throughout. I would like to redefine women instead of bringing themes of. And if you look at it, they were all written by males, right? Swati Raymond Kavi, all our composers were essentially male. What is the females' aspect of love? We never had women composers. It's not that they didn't exist. I'm sure their perspective of love and separation was entirely different. And I would also like to right now think about a woman as a single woman, as a single parent, as a single mother, as an elderly. So these are all aspects that one would like to consider in redefining your art. But again, that's very personal, because finally, when you bring something to the table, you should be really convinced about what you're trying to say. Don't do it for the sake of doing something. And when you're convinced, it just comes in naturally. Were there really Devadasis in Kerala? If so, how were their lives and experiences different from those of their even unpersonal? I teach English, and so my question. No, these are not simplistic questions. These are quite. There are anecdotes about Devadasis in Kerala. I have particularly read one by Leela Omcheri. Again, history is his and her story. So. The Devadasis they are again talking about is not Kerala. We are talking about Tamilagam, when Kerala was a part of Tamilagam, right? So that way we had a lot of women dancing in temples as such. There's one anecdote that I have read from Dikti Omcheri or Leela Omcheri, not very sure, about there being a dasi in a temple. Her name, she nobody saw her. She would wear a veil and she would go into the sanctum sanctorum, and then she would come out, and she was extreme. Those who've seen her say she was extremely beautiful. They also talk about, there are inscriptions about the dasis handing over land to different places during times of drought. Particularly, you have dasis handing over they were very wealthy, so handing over a lot of wealth. They some anecdotes also talk about them professing stuff, that the fact that they could foresee what was going to happen. In Tamilagam, yes, in Tamil Nadu you have, in Kerala, this is what I read, but I actually have my own doubts. We do have instances. I have also read instances of Devdasis from the Konkani Brahmins in Kochi. The fact that they were there also. So, but I haven't personally gone and found out for myself.
Ashar, please. Yeah, Ashar Khan.
Hello, ma'am. Hello.
Yes,
You are audible.
Hello. Oh, hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. It's an honor to listen to you and watch your beautiful performance, ma'am. As a light designer, I want to know what are your expectations while drafting a performance from a light designer or from lights. How do you perceive lights in your performance?
yeah. I like it to be as simplistic as possible. I would love to do a performance with just developer, just candle, or the flames. I would love to do a performance where I'm just lit by the flames, well lit. See, in video, what happens is you have the developer, but you have extra lighting also from different parts.
Yes, ma'am.
But ideally, I would really, and I would also like to try torch as a form of lighting. I would like to explore that. In Kerala, there's a problem, especially in terms of festivals and temples. They have so many lights, but they don't know where to place it. So you have so many lights, and all we need. I'm a solo performer. I just need lights that would actually light me up in a more three-dimensional way, not flat lighting, and my face too, because our performances are very face oriented. And of course, I would also like to have, when I do pure dance, I would like to have the rim lighting. So for this, where only my body is considered, the outline is there. So the expectations are there when you actually plan it. But when you plan a concert for 2 hours, the light designer has to be as prepared as the dancer and has to come for practice. And my also expectations are next is to actually work with the designer even during the choreography process. Not only the light designer, but I would also say the cinematographer. Because lighting for the camera.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for. Yes, ma'am. It's very different. Thank you, ma'am, for the valuable input that you. Thank you, ma'am.
Any more questions?
If you would like to see a few of my performances, you can go to Methil Devika at YouTube and you'll find a couple of. See, there are just snippets of performances that ideally, if you would like to see my performance, come for a concert, but I don't know when that is going to happen. But then on YouTube, Methil Devika, you'll find a few things. Srijit Ram. Also, she used to attend. Yes, I have attended the lightning workshop that was organized by them. Thank you so much.
Only very few dancers used to do that.
Yeah, and you know what? thanks to all of you. When I would go into the lights, many of the technicians used to not like it. I would go to the temple stages, and in the afternoon, I would probably see lights, and then I would get up, and then I would try and rig it, and they would say, "No, no, what are you doing? This is our, what are you doing with our things?" But then I would think, no, you want to be seen, you better do it yourself. Uh, yeah, right now, luckily, if the performance product, if the organizers gives a little bit more money, I take my technician.
There are no more questions. I think we can wind up. Thank you, Devika, and we look forward that after COVID is over, if you can come over to School of Drama and have a session with our students, we'd love it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great to actually do a movement session
Yes.
as to how to explore movement itself. This morning, I know that when I did that, many of them were really surprised as to how you actually break movement that is already ingrained in your body, but how you break that psyche of movement and you actually cheat yourself and stress your body into a different movement pattern altogether. So with classical dancers, the problem is we are all attuned to doing the same things again and again. It gets ingrained. But the moment you, for example, just need to do a retrograde, which means the correct inverse of the movement, and you'll know how different and difficult it is, how you're actually teasing your brain. So it would be great to actually try all that, with a session of people who use body as a medium, in theatre.
To deliver the formal vote of thanks, I invite Parshadi, who is a participant here, and I believe she is also a dancer. I know she's an actor. So Parshadi, please, over to you.
Yes, I also learned Mohiniyattam, ma'am. So it was a very informative session, and I'm also very curious to know how can I like meld dance and theater into when I make a performance tomorrow. So it was a very enlightening session, and it was so comprehensive. Like you contextualized Mohiniyattam in its sociological perspective. At the same time, not whitewashing the history, you problematized the history. Even the so-called romanticized bit about resurrection of Mohiniyattam by Vallathol, it's very important that we problematize those things as well.
Exactly.
So,
Just to give in, when most of the research work that we do actually talks to, but nobody looks at it from the aspect of the creators of it. You see, most of the time art is studied in isolation from the artist. You have to approach it very anthropologically as to the psyche of the makers is so important. What were they actually thinking? When they made something. Now, these are not, most of the time we talk about an art form as if they were created by the gods. They were certainly created for the gods, but not by them. So we were all human beings in the process of making it. Especially Mohiniyattam has a very, very sensitive history. And one way, if you look at me, women were also very empowered at a particular point of time. The whole idea of being, of seeking, of being one with oneself and not the whole Sambandha Vyavastha itself, if you look at it, it was not about relying on one particular man and for their happiness. They hardly knew whoever came and went. It was about being self-reliant, and which made them extremely attractive to the other person. They were not like leeches. Whatever, what happens is a person depends on your spouse. When you depend from your spouse, something that a whole tribe has to give you. You expect the person to be your physical partner, your mental supporter, your social partner, your philosophical reiterator. But all this never happened then in this particular cult. The woman was herself, by herself, and she had this entire imagery of the perfect, and which is why you find a lot of women writers for the Champu Kavyams, all those romantic lyrics, they mostly came from women of those areas. So it was basically a dialogue that they were creating with oneself. And the idea of perfect, they were not weaving on another man, but with oneself. And I think that's a very important part of performance.
That's so interesting, ma'am. Like that sheds a lot of light on the classical lineage of these art forms, and it was very interesting to say, like, you know, how you explore freedom in form. Like apparently you're working within a form, but you're so free in exploring it, and we can all take a cue from that because when we make theater, we approach it from theater space. But for you, I think it is a challenge in a very different way because you have to be within the realm of Mohiniyattam at the same time be equally creative with your very non-conventional themes. So that was extremely enlightening. And one or two takeaways that I keep in my mind is how you said at the end of the day, aesthetics is important, and it's not what you say it, it's how you say it. And I think this applies to all artworks when we make an original content. These are principles we can keep in mind. And so thankful for sharing your Ahalya with us because I know it was just released. I remember the Shali performance. It was released with Odissi dancers and all that. So it's such a special performance. So happy that you shared an excerpt of that with us. So thank you. Thanks a lot, ma'am, for this beautiful session. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you all for attending and being so attentive. I'm so glad that you gave me this opportunity, Vinod Narayan. And good to see you, Srijit, after so long. And I'm so glad you still remember me. Thank you so much, all of you, and have a safe, have a safe life and a great night.
Thank you very
Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, sorry. Okay, tomorrow we'll have the session on the words and the visuals by E. Santosh Kumar, one of the most important contemporary Malayalam writer. So once again, thank you all of you. See you all tomorrow. Good night.
Good night.